This is the video going over the very first lesson of Chapter 3, and it's the lesson you'll be doing right after the Chapter 2 test. Okay, so this is the worksheet you're using, the How Many Rubber Bands Does Barbie Need worksheet. We are not doing the Barbie activity because it's just too hard to do online. So we're going to skip down to the big ideas and tackle those. Okay, so there were two learning targets here. And the first one is something you've seen before, some words you've seen before. There is an explanatory variable and a response variable. And we saw this back when we did categorical variables, where you had two categorical variables against each other, not against each other, relationship between the two. And the same thing happens here. It does tend to matter more with the quantitative, which one is explanatory and which one is response, because you're going to make a scatter plot of this and you have to decide what goes on your X and what goes on your Y. So explanatory variable is used to predict the response variable. That's the outcome. It responds to the explanatory. Basically, the explanatory variable comes first, and it creates a response in the second variable, the response variable. Or you could say the explanatory variable explains the response you see in the response variable. Okay, and then learning targets number 2 and 3 are all about scatter plots. So a scatter plot has an X and a Y axis. Explanatory. So the explanatory variable is always on the X, on the horizontal axis, and the response is on the Y axis, on the vertical axis. And then you have, points inside of it. Now, there's going to be a lot of times you're going to be asked to describe a scatter plot or describe the correlation in a scatter plot. That word we'll get into much more next lesson. But describing comes down to 4 things. So we are going to have we're going to have an acronym to help us keep track of it. DUFS. D-U-F-S. DUFS. Okay, DUFS. D stands for direction, and that's specifically about positive, negative, there shouldn't be a comma there, positive or negative slope. Like if you were to imagine a best fit line going through that data, would the line be going up, has a positive slope, so a positive direction? Or would that best fit line be going down, negative slope, negative direction? U stands for unusual features, which is basically outliers, usually outliers. Are there outliers involved? F stands for form, and that is saying linear versus nonlinear. And in this class, 99% of the time, we'll be dealing with linear best fit lines. Dealing with when do you pick a quadratic line or quadratic equation, or when do you pick an exponential, is kind of beyond the scope of this class. So nearly in this class, it's going to nearly always be linear. And then strength. And we will get into details of strength more. That's correlation. That's R values, which may sound familiar from Algebra 2. We'll get into that much more later. But it's talking about how well do those points fit a best fit line. Are they kind of scattered all over the place and therefore they're pretty weak strength? Or do they make a pretty solid line and therefore it's very predictable where things go, and that would be a strong strength? Okay, so now I want you to pause their video and go down and do the check your understanding. Try to use what I just taught you. See if you can do the check your understanding. And then once you've given it your full effort, unpause the video and watch me go over it. Okay, so now we're going to go over the check your understanding. Don't just skip straight down to it. You should pause and try it on your own first. You will learn way more. Okay, So down to the check your understanding, they say, what's the explanatory and what's the response? So this takes some kind of common sense, real life knowledge, thinking about if I wanted to change one of them, which one would I choose to change first? Like, is one kind of leading into the other? So in this case, I would say sugar is the explanatory and calories is the response variable. Now, notice that it says explain your reasoning. Some of you are in bad habits from past math classes where you kind of just get an answer and then you move on. And when it says explain, you're like, I don't want to bother doing that. You need to practice that in this class because there's going to be a lot of times on the AP test it's going to ask you to interpret something or explain why something is, and you have to practice that technical language now so you're prepared for it later. Okay, so explain your reasoning. Basically, I would say if you add sugar to a recipe, the calories will go up. If you were a chef and you decided that you wanted a candy to have more calories for whatever reason, an easy way you could do that is dump more sugar in. The sugar would create a response of higher calories. The higher sugar level would explain the higher calories. You wouldn't say, I want less sugar, so therefore I should have less calories in. Well, you would have to take out the sugar. The sugar comes first and the calories are a result of the sugar. Okay, now for B, make a scatter plot. I made that already, so here it is. Now, this is a common thing. I would see a scatter plot looks like this. We have axes labeled and stuff, but it is still missing something big. So look at this, what is missing? And what is missing is words. You need to label your axes not only with numbers, but with words. So down here is sugar. Let's put some units on it. And on the vertical axis is calories. So axes should be labeled with numbers and words. Okay, now describe the relationship. Let's think about Duff's. This is a good answer. So let's see if we can find all of the things. D is direction. So there's direction. U is unusual features. I talked about possible outliers and I said what they were. Form is it linear or nonlinear? I said it's linear. And strength, I said fairly strong. And again, we'll get into much more detail later on how to really decide on strength and what to say for that. Okay, so that is the lesson for today. And make sure that you've put your full effort into this, and we will talk about all of this in the next lesson.